Robina La will round out our first month of programs in the year-long series, Women of Wisdom, celebrating the living legacy of Buddhist women. Many of you know this Buddhist woman from her background as a Tibetan Buddhist nun since the 1970s. Devoted to Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, she has worked for them not only as a worldwide teacher, but continues to brilliantly edit Dharma books and publications. Some of you may be here because you caught her on her chock-full mini Dharma teachings on social media, something to think about. Please check out her website, robinacorton.com, for a rich array of Dharma taught in her inimitable style. And now we are honored to offer her a mandala to begin tonight's teaching, Overcoming Clinging. Shall we go? Here we go. Sajipoki Chukchimeto Ramrira Lingji Nidegen Padi Sangye Jingdu Mite Uwagi Drokun Namdakshin La Choparsho.
And usually I sing this one. Usually,
Please do.
yeah, usually that's what happens. The center offers the mandala, which you just did, and we imagine Buddha received it, and we're very happy. And now we all do this one together. So always just reminding us what we're saying. You know, these first two lines are kind of for all of us though, who maybe we figure we are already Buddhists. So it's reiterating our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings. And the second lines are really stating our purpose for being here together. The Tibetans would say stating our motivation. We just say purpose. What's our purpose? Well, here we're going to make this big statement, you know, by the virtuous karma that we create by listening to these teachings. May we become an enlightened being so that we can be of benefit to others. So we'll say it in Tibetan too. Sangye chadang soke chongnam la jangcho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chernyen gi sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shok sangye chadang soke chongnam la jangcho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chernyen gi sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shok Sangye charang choke chongnamla jangcho baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chernyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drumpa shok. All right, everybody. Happy to see you all. Actually, I'm in France. I stayed on a week where I am in France. I was going to be at home in New York. So it's 2:30 in the morning here. I put my alarm on and hopped out of bed. I thought I couldn't cancel. So here I am, happily here. It's chilly. It's quite cold here. I don't know what it's like in San Francisco. Is it cold there? Oh, you got nice weather.
A little bit. We've had some really warm days in the 80s, but today it's a little rainy and chilly again.
Well, it's cold here, I tell you, cold and wet. Anyway, people, I'm here, I'm happy, and we're going to talk about how to give up clinging, which is really grade 1, entry level, all the way to highest advanced Buddhism, because it pervades all the way through the teachings, you know. So happy to be here, everybody. Happy to see you all. Clinging is such a nice word, isn't it? Really, clinging. It's nice. I like the word, actually, clinging, you know. But it's really, but it's very, it's very expressive. We really can see it, you know. So why would we want to give it up? Why would we? This is the thing. Why would we want to give it up? Because we think in simple terms, you know, attachment, clinging. It sounds nice. In a way, it does sound nice. Holding on to something. We cling to things. We cling to people. We cling to events, ideas, memories. It sounds nice. So it seems rather cruel that we have to give it up because we can't think of an alternative, you know. So this is, I think, one of the problems when we hear Buddhist psychology. You know, it seems so absolutist. It seems so kind of extreme. Especially when we think of a Buddhist, we kind of have this image of a person sitting there in meditation, having kind of given up everything, you know. See, it seems very extreme. That's why we have to really understand what Buddha's saying. We have to understand the way he sees the mind. It's not really the way we talk in the West at all. It's not, in some way it is, but it's really quite fundamentally different, and it's hard to hear it properly. And the fundamental point in Buddhist psychology, the fundamental point, the starting point, and this really is not how we think in our culture, it's just not, is that the way he describes the mind, and this is actually coming from the genius Indians before him, you know, these Hindu geniuses, these scholars and yogis. Buddha came out of that, you know, he went through this incredible system as far as he could go. And I mean, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, it was these amazing Indians who, you know, who were the ones who first, more than 3,000 years ago, actually, you know, we honestly, I say it as a joke, but I think we mean it. We really do think psychology began with Mr. Freud, maybe 100 years ago, or whatever it was, you know. But this is 3,000 years ago. They were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self, exactly who we are, what we are. And that's a surprise to hear, because we hear religion. We think we've come a long way. We've now got psychology, and certainly we have neuroscience as new. But I mean, we've got, you know, religious philosophy, and we don't think of it as understanding the nature of self, understanding who we are. We think that's fairly modern. It really, really, really seriously is not, you know. And the more people like us, modern people, when we study Buddhism seriously and you start to put it into practice, because it's still the language is clearly arcane, and you start to put into your own language, I mean, it's just incredibly sophisticated psychology. There's just no question about it. But the crucial point about this is an aside point. Then I'll get to the actual point. But this is also crucial to know. What is the way to investigate the mind, you know, and that's fairly new in the West. Okay, Freud, you know, began what I suppose what we call psychotherapy. Maybe that's Freud, I don't know, really talking about and looking into how we think and feel and unpacking it and unraveling it. That we're really good at doing. We really kind of want to do that in the West, all our psychotherapies, all our different approaches. But the key one that the Buddha is expert at, and this came from these Indians, is this information doesn't come from seeing a brain. This information Buddha does not discuss a brain at all. This comes from looking inside, literally, and that's where this brilliant skill that these Indians invented, which is a key technique in Buddhism, and to really succeed in the way Buddha says we can, we need to have this technique, develop it. It helps you. It's what the world vaguely knows as mindfulness, you know, but it's a very specific technique that enables you to super focus the mind, and which enables you therefore to subdue the grosser level of the endless crazy chatting, and to also even subdue the sensory, which sounds very weird, because these people, these geniuses, they discovered quite literally a much subtler level of mind, a much subtler level of our capacity for cognition. So it's super. So this approach is super subjective, super focused and clear, and the level to which the Buddhists would say that we can unpack and unravel and know and radically change the way we think and feel is really quite shocking, you know, really quite shocking, amazing, in fact, incredible. But basically, the Buddhist view is saying that and this is where now we get to the point I want to discuss, how we look at what the mind is, what goes on in the mind. They have a very extensive, a very sophisticated view, the epistemological model of the mind, the way the mind functions. And again, they're not talking the brain, they're talking the internal subjective cognitive process itself. So there's that, but here I'm going to discuss the contents of the mind. They call the psychological model, the way what goes on, what are the names of the states of mind, what are they, how do they differ? And that's where this skill of concentration comes in, because you can learn to internally, clearly, crystal clear, unpack and unravel it. That's not a technique that we have in the West. This concentration technique is unique to these Indians, you know, with greatest respect to all our other amazing, you know, religious philosophies over the world. These genius Indians were the ones who did this, and this is also central to the Buddhist technique, this ability to become more clear and more subtle internally so that you can really do this job extremely well. And that's the point here. And so this and the distinction, therefore, that I'm saying is so different as well, in the Buddhist view of the mind is clear presentation of all and so we know there are thousands upon thousands of thoughts and feelings and emotions. If you started listing them, I mean, we wouldn't even have a method of listing them. We don't have, but that's what they have in Buddhism, you know. And so there's this clear way to distinguish, and this is the essence of being a Buddhist, is understanding this and applying this. We've got states of mind that are neurotic, painful, distorted. They call them mental afflictions. You could say they are called mental illnesses. Then there's a positive lot. Virtuous, useful, appropriate, valid, positive, optimistic, good, helpful states of mind. The first lot are the source of our pain and suffering and cause us to make a mess of our lives. And the second lot are the cause of our happiness and our fulfillment and contentment, you know, and ability to help others. I mean, so we know there's a state of mind called anger, depression, anxiety. We know they limit us, they constrict us, they make us miserable, and when we're in those states of mind, we're not very nice to other people. We know that, but we don't make a big fuss about really just homing in on those and how to eliminate them. Well, we do. No, it's not true. We do. Then the other lot, the virtuous lot. So the Buddha's simple point, and this is indicated by the word Buddha, and I love this. You know, the etymology of this word Buddha is so simple. And this is the end result. From the Buddhist point of view, this is our end result. This is where we go. This is what he has said, this person back in India, this is what he has said, he has achieved, and he's found, and he's presenting his methodology. This is what I've done. Here are my methods, and over to you if you want to do the same thing. And so this word Buddha tells us, and it's kind of outrageous. The first syllable, da, implies the total, 100%, absolute, complete, permanent eradication from our minds of states of mind like ego, grasping, misery, clinging, attachment, jealousy, depression, low self-esteem, anxiety, etc. He says we can completely remove those states of mind from our mind. They're cognitive, they're conceptual stories, are deep in the bones of our being that we're totally habituated with, and they can be removed. That's what he's saying. Now, he doesn't mean you cut a piece of your brain out. We tried that back in the 1930s and turned people into vegetables. Not that. He is saying that it's a subjective cognitive process, internal. And then the second syllable, da, implies the development to perfection of everything else in the mind, the virtuous ones, the positive ones, love, compassion, kindness. So in other words, his point is, what he's found is that first lot are actually, there's a term they use in Buddhist psychology, they're adventitious, which means they can be removed. We don't need them. They make a mess. They limit us, constrict us, make us miserable, and cause suffering. So when you hear the typical teachings in Buddhism, it's teachings about the Four Noble Truths, how to get rid of suffering, you know. Well, this is his method. This is the essential method. Bottom line, it comes down to this. And that's surprising to us. When we go to our therapists, the main part of our discussion, first of all, it could be the brain or the genes or the DNA and the chemicals. We take some pills to balance the chemicals, or we change our husband because the one beats us up and we get another husband, or we change the food, or we change the. We're very involved in changing the outside world as a method to get happy. That's clear. In fact, that's our main method. The Buddha says it's exactly the opposite. He doesn't say changing your outside world isn't common sense. It is, but it's not the main source of happiness, and it won't remove the suffering. These words are simple, but when we really start to apply them, it's the hardest job we'll ever do. But this is the essence of being a Buddhist. This is the essence, absolute essence of being a Buddhist, you know. And therefore, you don't need to be a Buddhist to do it. I mean, Buddha doesn't own this stuff. He doesn't have copyright on it. He didn't make it up. He's observed it. That's the key point. He's not a creator. There's no concept like that in Buddhism. So if that's true, then, if this is true, if it's true, we can quit suffering. Of course, he talks about it in a much more dramatic level than we do, a much more subtle level, just broadly speaking. If we can quit suffering altogether, not to mention just lessen it, which would be delightful, and want to make and develop more happiness, and that's his method, then we better learn to know to distinguish the difference. And that's the job. That's the job that's difficult. That's the job that's tremendously difficult, because they're all together in a big soup. They're like in a big vegetable soup, all mixed together, and not even just lumps of veggies, but they're pureed vegetables. It's practically impossible to distinguish them. And that's our problem. So, of course, when we hear we've got to give up, Buddha says you've got to, if you want to be happy, honey child, he says you've got to give up attachment, another word for clinging. So because we think of clinging and attachment as something delicious and joyful and the cause of happiness when it comes to cakes or boyfriends, then we think we've got to give it up. So immediately, because we can't distinguish anything else there, we think it also means love and happiness. So I remember, as Lama Zopa says so clearly, when we hear the Buddha says that, we go, oh, you mean I've got to give up my heart? I've got to give up my happiness? So we end up, even if we're good Buddhists, if we don't know how to distinguish first, theoretically, by learning it, it's a very clear methodology. First learning his clear definitions, first theoretically, and then accurately applying that in our mind and learning to distinguish the neurotic, I-based, deluded states of mind from the positive, virtuous, useful ones, then we'll just be going from pillar to post and we'll go crazy. And it's extremely difficult because they are utterly mixed, because we're so we're so used to them being mixed. So a simple example will be the discussion about what is love and what is attachment. Love and attachment, love and attachment. I mean, it's such a classic kind of pair, we'll discuss. But it's the same with something like, we all know, we hear the word pride. We hear it, to be proud of your success, it seems like a good quality. But in general, the word pride in Buddhist psychology, or arrogance, they're synonymous, and we know it means kind of overinflated sense of your importance. We know that. We know what it means. We mightn't often think we've got it, and that's a surprise to us, and we'll look at it. But I think then we hear someone who's proud or got pride or arrogance, and then we hear the word self-confidence. We sort of assume, and we know that's a nice word. I need self-confidence. We sort of assume they're the same. And unless you know well the characteristic of these states of mind, first knowing theoretically, like distinguishing between a weed and a herb, if you don't know even theoretically the difference between a weed and a herb, and then specifically each one, and then when you look, knowing how to apply that knowledge, you'll make a mess of your garden, I promise. And it's a good analogy, because that's what we're trying to do in this mind of ours. We're trying to lessen the neuroses and grow the goodness. It's as simple as that, the concept, but it's extremely difficult because we are totally these different the states of mind to whatever degree in each person: attachment, anger, jealousy, anxiety, low self-esteem. We know them so intimately. They're kind of completely woven into our mind as what we would think as a natural part of a natural person. In other words, we think they're so natural that you'd be unnatural if you didn't have them. So this is why it sounds shocking, I mean, very simply, you go to your therapist and you say, would you please give me methods to get rid of all anger totally? Or you go to your neuroscientist, he'll think he's got to get a scissors and cut your piece of brain out. It's too extreme. We don't think this way. It's too extreme. So the fact is, it is extreme, and it's long term, and that's what a Buddha is, and that's a bit of a concept for us. I mean, a bit weird, but this is the whole point. This is what's in Buddhist psychology. This is the whole point of the entire path to enlightenment, as they call it. This is what's possible. And the other point is we hear it as religion. Oh, it's up in the sky somewhere, la-di-da, We don't hear it as grounded psychology, but it is totally grounded psychology. If it's not that, it is just la-di-da, So how do you distinguish between love and attachment? How do you distinguish between pride and low self-esteem and pride and self-confidence? Or equally, humility and low self-esteem? We completely mix these up. We completely mix them up. We can't feel the difference. So if you can't feel the difference, you've got to first know what the difference is. And this is Buddha. Freud mightn't talk like this. Jung mightn't talk like this. Your latest psychology person might not talk like this. And there's a new model every day. We know that. So we've got to know what he means by it. You can play sort of like and the Buddhist psychology is very specific. It's very interesting. It's intricate and precise in its definitions. Like 9 different types of pride, listing exactly, really clinically. Really clinical, really precise. And this, again, keep remembering, this knowledge has coming from listening, hearing, seeing your own actual conceptual process, your own internal cognitive process. So you can't do this job really well, of course, until you have what they call this single-pointed concentration. or even some semblance of concentration. And we need it. It's practical. You can't even make a cake if you haven't got good concentration. If you can't focus on what you're doing, how can you make a cake? You can't. So how can you possibly dig deep, deep, deep into the mind to levels of subtlety that we don't even posit as existing in modern psychology, unless you've got this technique? And this is why this whole approach is more than 3,000 years old from these Indians. You know, they're genius. And it's only really now modern thinkers, intellectuals, philosophers, neuroscientists are really starting to see the incredible knowledge that's been there in India, coming out of India now. And I think it's because of the Dalai Lama being so current, so prevalent in the world, you know, more and more and more discussion between people, which I think is amazing. So given that, let's look then at the difference between what it is we should get rid of and what it is we should develop. If you're studying Buddhism, you're going to hear all the time variations of a phrase like this. We need to learn to know what to abandon and what to cultivate, not what to give up and what to develop. You hear that all the time. And that makes sense if you're thinking you're going to get rid of the delusions and grow the virtues. You've got to be able to distinguish between them. And that's the part that's incredibly hard, you know. Because we can see we've got 1,000 thoughts a second, and they're never stopping, endlessly in there at levels and levels and levels. You know, we can see that. So to begin to make sense of this mind of ours, I mean, this concentration is utterly necessary. Most of us in this, and also most of us in this world, to get it properly, you've got to give up sex and drugs and rock and roll for a while and go to the mountains and get it in a serious way, to go very deep and get it. And then you come back and you can then do some useful things. Most of us won't do that. So most of us might apply a little bit of it in our daily lives, but not much, you know. So, what are the characteristics then? What are the characteristics of the unhappy ones, which are why they cause us pain? And what are the characteristics, therefore, of the positive ones, which, of course, are the ones that don't have the characteristics of the bad ones? There's a phenomenal difference. So I think love and attachment is a really good pair, because these are the ones we're so involved in one way or another, where it's for our pet, our mother, our beloved, our sister, you know, we use these words a lot in our relationships. Well, the neurotic ones, the typical word in Buddhist psychology, as we all know, is simply the word affliction. Affliction. They of course mean mental. They don't mean like afflictions, you know, can also be like physical problems. But here he's talking, of course, the mind, mental afflictions. But of course, it's an old-fashioned word. We don't use it, you know. I mean, it's a very general word. Affliction, a problem, suffering, mental affliction. Of course, it sounds shocking to say that attachment is a mental illness, because we think mental illnesses are very extreme, and only some people have those. Most people are normal, but if you're really problem, you've got and that's pretty hideous to have a mental illness. But that's exactly really, Buddha would have liked that phrase, I think. That's exactly what he's saying. And he's saying we've all got mental illnesses. As long as you've got attachment, anger, anxiety, low self-esteem, depression, arrogance, you got mental illnesses. They are in their nature mental illnesses. That's a shock to us. That we don't think, you know, that's a big shock. Oh my God, that's a big shock. But that's what he's saying. But we can fix it. We can fix it. You can take a pill if you like, but we can fix it. And it's an intensely difficult job. But it's done. It's possible. So, but the other thing that's extremely hard to hear, and unless we understand this, we can't do the job, basically, is that all these unhappy states of mind. Okay, no, go back a second to the epistemological model of the mind is the way the mind works. And so there's a particular way here that makes it's very simple. We know we have states of mind that are called sensory, you know, eye, consciousness, ear. And we really look at those, they're very kind of limited in a way, but very powerful. We give them enormous power. I mean, we make the body the boss, Lama, as she says, you know. But they're kind of very specific, the way you cognize things, shapes and colors and sounds, you know. But the other part of our mind, and this is the point, is what's called the mental consciousness, your mental consciousness. And that's where the workshop is, as Lama Zopa says. That's what we have to learn to become super familiar with, and to be able to unpack and unravel and radically reconfigure, to lessen the neuroses and grow the goodness, you know. So then within the mental consciousness, there's two levels. or there's gradations of it. But we live at the grosser level. The tip of the iceberg of our mental consciousness, and this is surprising to us, is conceptuality. Now, we would say up here is conceptuality. When you learn maths and you learn very intellectual concepts, or you study musical theory, all those, that's all conceptual. We think that's conceptual. And we think of it as very clear, and that's conceptual. Then we point here, and then we think emotion. And we make an utter distinction. So this is another point that we've all heard 1,000 times, and we're Buddhists, but it's still hard to hear it, that we say emotion, which we think is completely different. And the Buddhist perspective, the Buddhist analysis of the mind, is that all the levels we function at, including what we call theoretical, intellectual, and emotional, they are all at the level of conceptuality. In other words, but the emotional ones got the added component of affecting our body. So when you see a person who's angry, emotional, you see them shouting, their mind is racing, their thoughts are, their breath is intense, their body's out of control. We go, that's conceptual. What are you talking about? But that anger, which is expressing itself as an emotional level through the body, like our anxiety, like our depression, like all our emotions, we feel them in our body, we say it like that. But they are mental. They are the mind. And they are so deeply instinctively ingrained in our mind, those particular states of mind called anger, for example, but because they're so intense, because they're so habitual, and the stories are going deep down underneath, which are conceptual stories, because they're so strong, they literally also affect our body, because we know the mind and the body are super connected. And Buddhist psychology, coming from the Vajrayana teachings, the more advanced teachings, have a very clear way of analyzing this, which is very fascinating. So we call them emotional because our body is feeling them and we're shaking up and down like yo-yos, emotional. But those emotions, which are at the level of the body, but we can unpack them and go down into them, and we get to hear how they are purely conceptual stories, like scripts we have written in our mind, and the Buddha would say for countless lifetimes, that they are totally habitual. We are so convinced and totally automatic, totally instinctive. My mother did not have to teach me to be angry. I knew. I'd brought it with me. The conceptual story was complete in my mind, and I just expressed it. And that's why it's so hard to get in touch with the mind. That's why it's so hard to change. Because when we think of it as physical, we think of it as emotional, you think, how can you change that? And so then, of course, we think we suppress it. And that's a disaster. That is not the answer at all, So we live at a conceptual level. The other level, they call it perception, which is a regular word in English, but it's referring in Buddhist psychology to a really specific level of mind that you only can access when you've got single point of concentration, samadhi, shamatha, So it's really sophisticated, and we need to get to that level eventually. And that's where we get direct experience of everything at the subtlest level. That we don't even get. Never touch that, ever. I mean, virtually never touch it, So we live at the conceptual level. But there's already an enormous amount we can do at this conceptual level. But that's why we have to develop these techniques called mindfulness, some level or other of them, to kind of steady our mind, just even a little bit to steady the chaos. So we can start to hear these conceptual stories, to start to hear in our own mind how all these emotions are rooted in being conceptual stories. This is the essence of the approach in Buddhism. And actually, if you haven't studied the model of the mind, I mean, you people at Seichin Ling, you're learning, I hope, and have studied Lorig, this detailed text that's been around for thousands of years that identifies these cognitive states, precisely. And that's still used, and it's still valid. Anger 3,000 years ago is no different from anger now. Jealousy 3,000 years ago is no different. Levels, degrees, yes, but no different. So, these genius Indian scholars and yogis, they're the ones who articulated this 3,000 years ago. Buddha came along 2,500 years ago. And of course, there's commentaries over the years, over the centuries, all the body of knowledge is vast. All the beings who've taken Buddhism and made it their own and become their own therapists, as Lama Zopa puts it. All the body of knowledge there is vast. The commentaries on the great beings over the centuries are vast, on all about these states of mind. Well, that's the background to remember. We have to remember this. This is sort of this is what's involved, So, okay, what is attachment, or this category it's in? There's a category, if you like, called, we can be loose about it, negative. Negative is an interesting word. We don't like it, but we'll explain why. Neurotic, delusional, unhappy. Lama Zopa made up so many wonderful terms to try and describe how these states of mind function, and therefore why they cause us suffering. So, okay, so attachment and love. Well, attachment's in the first category, neurotic, delusional, ridiculous, voice of ego, and effectively, when you look at the Four Noble Truths, this first teaching Buddha gave after he kind of did the job of becoming a Buddha and he started teaching, effectively they say, it's not the subtlest mistake in the mind, it's not the subtlest neurosis, but it's effectively in daily life the main cause of our suffering, which is very surprising. And if it is, we better know what he means by it. We had better know what they mean by it in Buddhism, Attachment. Then they have the called love. Well, love is in the other category, the second. It's a virtue. It's valid. It's reasonable. It's appropriate. It's not the cause of suffering. It's the cause of happiness. But if we're, and of course for us, the thing is, you won't be attached to people you don't love. Well, when we're really ridiculous, we are. We'll discuss that. And we do not love people we're not attached to. That's a fact. So if that's axiomatic, then of course we can be forgiven for thinking they're the same state of mind. We can't distinguish, They're just mixed, like I said, like a pureed soup, which is why it takes time first hearing the difference and then trying to apply it and then to do the job of lessening the attachment and clinging and growing the love. It's an intensely difficult job to do. As Lama Zopa says, I can tell you about attachment for one whole year. There's no way in the world anything will change until you start to develop something deep inside, this internal practice. Be your own therapist. Okay, so the qualities, there are two main characteristics of the neuroses, the neurotic ones. He would have liked that word. Buddha would have liked that word, I think, neurotic. It's a very general term, I know, but I'm just using it loosely to convey the feeling of these afflictions. The two main qualities all the afflictions have. It's what characterizes them as mental afflictions, and there's two main ones. One is, and this is indicated by the term, disturbing emotion. They'll use that phrase in Buddhism. I think Tibetans use that. Disturbing emotion, disturbing. It's a really good term, disturbing. Well, check a person's angry. They're disturbed, honey child. Can you not see? They are very definitely experiencing a disturbing emotion, It's a very loose term, but it's a very clear quality, characteristic that the unhappy states of mind possess. There's no doubt about that. They cause you to be disturbed. Not to mention you end up causing disturbance among everybody else. That's a fact. Disturbing emotion. It's a good term. The other one really gets us to see how the conceptual stories rooted in our being from habit, conceptual story, a script, a viewpoint, conceptual story. And this is the term that really conveys. And they are literally, the noun is they are a delusion. A delusion isn't that you think, a delusion is not referring to something out there. In this way here, a delusion is referring to a state of mind. Anger, for example, is a disturbing emotion, and it has this other characteristic of being a delusion. This is a term not just a vague kind of thing, but it's very specific. It's a deluded state of mind. It's a it causes you to be delusional. That's shocking to us because we don't think being angry is delusional. The key is, what does it mean? When we understand what it means, we can then begin the job of identifying it. That's the key thing, those two qualities. So the disturbing is fairly evident, isn't it? But not with attachment. We can't see that. But with something extreme like anger, we can see it. It's a disturbing emotion. We can't always see it with pride, but with low self-esteem, I think we can really say that's a disturbing emotion. It's very, it's this self-loathing we have in the West, in the modern world, this really profound feeling of being less. We can feel that as definitely as disturbing, I think. But anger is a very typical one because it's so volatile. Like a person who's shouting. Of course, anger goes to much subtler levels, but we're talking about the very extreme level of anger when you're shouting, your body's shaking, the spit's coming out the mouth, the eyes wide in horror. And we can see that. It's very disturbing. We can see that to you, not to mention the people you harm because of it, you know. So all the neuroses, all this first category of states of mind, they all have that characteristic. But the thing that makes them the problem, and this is with job, this is giving us the doorway into how to change them. That they are delusional. So that means that's where we can now see clearly in the way Buddhism describes that they are conceptual thoughts. They are conceptual thoughts, but because they're so habitual, so pervasive, so automatic, so virtually instinctive from practicing. That's why, from practicing, not in their nature, but because of practicing. So we practice them for so long. And that means, of course, Buddha says, coming from past lives. I mean, why, as a little girl, my mother didn't have time to teach me how to be angry. And of course, we can talk about genes and DNA, and that's the materialist model. But the Buddhist view is consciousness is not the brain. It depends upon it at a gross level. But these are in the mind itself, the conceptual mind itself, the subjective cognitive process itself, conceptual thoughts. And because we've so believed in these conceptual thoughts, believed in these disturbing thoughts, believed in this conceptual story deep in our being for so long that even as a little girl, having brought it with me, Buddha says, this is the crucial point for the Buddha, we don't get them from mummy and daddy. We bring them with us. We're so habituated that it's automatic. That's what instinct, that's for the Buddha what instinct means. You come into this life with certain habits that are evident. That's instinct. You've done them that often, you've thought them that often that they are second nature. And that's why they're so hard to see. So let's look at why these disturbing emotions have this characteristic of being delusional, causing us to be delusional. So we know if someone accuses you of being delusional, it means you're not in touch with reality. Well, that is bullseye, absolute bullseye for the Buddha. That's exactly and precisely and exactly what he is saying. And that goes all the way to the subtlest level of when you finally remove the subtlest lie from the mind and you become a Buddha. These delusions are misconceptions. They're all conceptual, rooted in being concepts, and they are misconceptions. Literally, anger is a misconception. So that's pretty ridiculous. What do you mean it's a misconception? He was mean to me. What are you saying it's a misconception? No, he's not saying the person wasn't mean to you. He's not saying that. The anger itself, deep in the bones of our being, is this script that ego has written and that we now believe in, and that it now informs everything we see and do and say. They are so pervasive, these lies, these misconceptions. So only when you learn to steady the mind to some real degree that you can actually begin to hear the misconception. And this is what's hard to see. So attachment is a misconception. Anger is a misconception. Jealousy is a misconception. Low self-esteem is a misconception. Arrogance is a misconception. These are literal. Now we know they're emotions. That's one thing. We know they're disturbing. That's the tip of the iceberg. That's good enough to get us to want to look into them and get rid of the bloody things, But here, misconception is the part that's hard. So we don't get if we don't hear the definitions and the analysis, because it's a very precise, sophisticated model of the mind, then we can't just make it up. We've got to know what Buddha means by it, So all the neuroses, all the mental illnesses, all the mental afflictions, all possess these two characteristics. So how is attachment or clinging, this state of mind, how is it a misconception? How is anger a misconception? How is low self-esteem a misconception? Well, we can see it. It's not complicated. Attachment especially is so clear. Attachment, all these afflictions, their key function in terms of being delusional is that they exaggerate. They exaggerate the status of something, the thing or the person you're angry with, the cake that you think is delicious. These delusions in the mind, these misconceptions in the mind, these disturbing emotions in the mind, when they're prevailing, dominate, when they're very strong. And that's where they completely dominate the others. The good ones sort of shrink down, or love, if you like. I think of all these roommates. I always think of all these different states of mind as my roommates. And it's a good way to put it because they're yours. And you've got the virtuous roommates, the loving roommate, the kind roommate, the patience, generosity, forgiveness, and there you are with your sister that say, or your boyfriend, whoever, and you're being very loving. And love is not delusional. Love is not a misconception. Love is not a disturbing emotion. But because we can't see the difference, it just feels like it's the same as attachment. And then what happens is, so when you're fairly quiet, then love can have a say. Love is out there chatting away. Oh, how can I help you, darling? Are you happy? What can I do for you? And we can't hear the difference between it and attachment. We can't hear the difference, but attachment is there, and I'll explain. And then when something goes wrong, and he starts being mean to you, or something goes wrong, and the fight starts, then love shrinks away, disappears, and goes and hides in the wardrobe, hides in the closet, hides under the mattress, because it now has no say. Gradually, attachment and anger are growing bigger and bigger, and they're dominating the house. They are running the show, and suddenly all the virtues, the love, the kindness, the opposite of the delusions have disappeared. They're scaredy babies and run away. And so they don't have a say at all now. And this is when the delusions take over. And this is when the nightmares start. This is when the suffering becomes so evident, So attachment, the Buddha talks about attachment as a really fundamental one, And he even talks about, if you've read any Buddhist books, you're going to hear the word 3 poisons. It sounds so cute. The 3 poisons, the 3 toxic emotions, attachment and anger affect the root one. We won't even go there today. But the root one is the deep, the one that they are rooted in, which is a primordial mistaken sense of self that limits us. Forget that one. But attachment effectively and anger are there. And we're running between these 1,000 times a day because even though we hear the words, we can't see a relationship, but there's this intimate relationship between attachment and anger. So they exaggerate, okay? They're there, they're quiet. Love is having a good day. Kindness is having a good day. Patience is having a good day. And we think everything's lovely. So therefore, we don't notice there's other stuff underneath, but they're there vividly. We only notice those vividly when the fight starts, the thing goes wrong, and then all the virtues, the good ones shrink away and disappear. They don't even have a say anymore. Then we can start to hear the craziness of these delusions, these mental afflictions, these misconceptions. So how then does attachment exaggerate, distort? How is it? What is it saying? If it's a misconception, what are the words it's saying? Well, we'll use a simple example of the object of attachment, and that's your friend. Well, no, a cake is easier. Keep a cake simple, or any delicious object, like food, let's say, chocolate, doesn't matter, use a cake. Forget the dynamic when it comes to a friend. That's different. Keep that separate. And so, because anger mightn't come much with a cake, but we'll see a subtle level of it. So attachment is there driving. The Buddha says it's underneath us, driving everything we do. This is a most primordial mental affliction, so pervasive that it pervades everything we do. It's there, implied, implicit, all the time, and we don't notice it. So how then does it exaggerate? Because their key job is to exaggerate. Their misconceptions because they exaggerate. So attachment first of all, it comes from in here, obviously, and the feeling of it is dissatisfaction, aching feeling of not being enough, aching feeling of not having enough. Not being enough is even more primordial. Not only do I not have enough, but I am not enough. And this is the one of low self-esteem. This is a function of attachment. And it's from habit of having attachment. It's the habit of having, it's the
We're having a little bit of a technical issue with Venerable Ravina's feed. We'll be back on as soon as we can. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah. So the next level, I remember my last phrase, the next level of attachment. First, there's a dissatisfaction. Something's missing, the pain, the ache. And we can see this is way more than intellectual. It's just kind of feeling, isn't it? And we're kind of distressed, dissatisfied, distressed. This distress and this dissatisfaction is the result of having practiced attachment all the time. It's the consequence of it. So, and it kind of leads to the next piece of attachment. So the next level of attachment is it becomes proactive now, thinking I must find something. So then you think cake, and the mind gets all now excited. And the next level of attachment is now switching from dissatisfaction to excitement and anticipation. Suddenly, wow, there's hope that you can get something to make the pain go away. Get all excited. That's a key function of attachment. And this is overexcitement, and immediately already this conceptual level of attachment of exaggerating is already playing its job. It hears cake, and it gets excited because why? Because suddenly now attachment is right there in your mind, is completely over exaggerating the deliciousness of this cake you're going to have, and especially the power of that cake to make the dissatisfaction go away. So the more the attachment is in here, and that's why if we look inside, the stronger the attachment internally, that means the stronger your dissatisfaction. That means the stronger your emotional hunger, because attachment at this proactive level is an emotional hunger. So the more you have dissatisfaction, the more, therefore, low self-esteem. They come together. I am not enough. I'm not enough. I'm not enough. This kind of feeling of shrunken. So this dissatisfaction comes, and then attachment proactively starts its story, and then think cake, and then it immediately starts to is automatically exaggerating, grossly exaggerating the deliciousness of this object and the power of this object to take away the pain. And then we follow that like a maniac. And we believe it totally. And the anticipation is a major part of attachment, which feels delicious. There's nothing more wonderful than thinking of the cake and then getting all excited, ring up your friend, let's go out for dinner, let's go out for a meal, get really excited. So that excitement is anticipation. So you think that's nice to have anticipation. It is true. And it seems cruel that that's a function of attachment. I mean, I've got to give up anticipating. I'm going to be completely boring. So that's why it's really hard to distinguish. So we look forward to the cake, but the more internally it's this emotional hunger. It's kind of a frantic, kind of a desperate anticipation. Craving to get that object. So you can see it when it's extreme, like for something like when it's really at a level of extreme addiction, like for some objects that are very intense, like alcohol or cigarettes or drugs or video games, or you think about it, or sex with your boyfriend, extreme levels of it where you can't stop thinking about that object. That's a key sign, a key indicator of the presence of this mental affliction in your mind, when you can't stop thinking about the object. Every one of us can hear that. And that's pretty shocking to think. That's a sign of this mental affliction. We just think it's normal life, when you can't stop thinking about it. It's there in your mind. And we can see when it's really obsessive, this is when you go completely crazy. When you're obsessive, that's what it is, extreme attachment. This conceptual chatting, never stopping. It's obsessive. You can't let go. Clinging, talk about clinging, grasping is a better term, So it's a simple function of it. This is happening all the time. It's there every second. It's there every second. This is just a simple one example. So the next step of it in this process is, of course, you've got to get the cake. And that's what we think they're looking forward, not just to dreaming about the cake, not just to seeing a picture of the cake, but to putting it where it belongs, which is in the mouth, isn't it? We don't put it in the wrong ear, up here or something. Oh, where the cake go, here. No, it goes here. And this is what we call instinctive, because we've done it before, Buddha says, for countless lifetimes. We're totally programmed. So this exaggerating is running the show now, this incredible anticipation of this divine object that's going to fill up this feeling of not being enough. It's huge. So the more the feeling of not being enough, the more the emotional hunger, more the exaggeration, more the anticipation, and the more manipulating. This is where it becomes wicked. It manipulates, it controls. We say, oh God, she's such a control freak. That's attachment, people. All coming from this process internally. And then you have to get that object. If you're really attached to that thing, you will do anything to get it. You'll control anyone and anything to get that object. We know, we can see that function. And then you get the cake. Then you get the cake. And this is where the suffering really starts to kick in. The suffering of attachment, because it is an exaggeration. That's the key thing we have to see. We say we make mountains. I know, but what is it? Our rose-colored spectacles. Our rose-colored spectacles. It's so cute, but this is the function of attachment. So when you're really clinging for something, really emotionally hungry for something, really attached to something, a person, an object, it dominates your mind. We can see that. It absolutely takes over everything in your head, doesn't it? We can see that. And it's emotional. It's painful. So we think the peace will come. We think the satisfaction will come finally when you get the cake in the mouth. And this is a whole nother level of pain that's very hard to hear. What happens next? You finally get the cake in the mouth. So attachment's there running its show. There's all these other parts of your mind. Attachment's dominating, but there's many other parts of the mind. There's your intelligence, your ability to distinguish cake from biscuit, a million different other parts of your mind, all working in hand to get what attachment wants. You finally get the object in the mouth. And now what will happen, which is what attachment's been anticipating, is pleasure, happiness. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with pleasure, happiness, joy, happy feeling. That's what attachment wants to get. And Buddha would say, fine, nothing wrong with happy feelings. In fact, he's saying, honey child, I've got a method of how to get very happy feelings that won't change into unhappy feelings, which is what we know they do. And that's what his whole methodology is about, how to get happy. How to get rid of suffering means how to get happy. It's not to make us more miserable. It's how to get happy. And he says our methods right now are a disaster. So now the time comes, you get the cake. And now this is when the tragedy happens, the real suffering part comes. Build up of emotional hunger, build up of tremendous anticipation, tremendous exaggeration of this incredible thing that's going to make you so happy, whatever it might be. So you get the cake in the mouth and attachment's still there. And its function now is anticipating. And now pleasure will come. The cake will meet the mouth, will meet the senses, will meet the mouth. First you've seen it, it looks delicious, and you're getting even more excited. You can smell it, you get even more excited. Finally, it's got to be in the mouth. You get it in, and pleasure is triggered. There is a happy feeling. Guaranteed. But the trouble is, there's attachment, this junkie right there, manipulating, disappointed, no, not disappointed yet, dissatisfied, emotional hungry, anticipating, controlling, manipulating, expecting, anticipating, build up. The cake goes in the mouth, and attachment, you'd think attachment will say, oh, amazing, I'm so happy now. No, attachment will say, sorry, Rabina, it's not enough. Right there, that second, it doesn't even wait. But that first moment of pleasure, which is the best moment, and attachment is like this person who's never satisfied. No, not enough. Have another mouthful. Not happy yet. This is the pain of attachment. So what happens? You get another mouthful. And again, now attachment has become desperate again because it didn't happen. The pleasure, the satisfaction, the joy, it came for a moment, but already it's dissipating because attachment's saying, do it again. It's not enough. So you put another mouthful in, and already it's going downhill from there. We know it. And this is what we've been doing, Buddha says, for eons. And it's a very deep habit, and it's the source of all our pain. So then you put the second mouthful in, hopefully the pleasure will come again, but it already is less and already less. And the third piece, the fourth piece, and now we know before you realize it, where has the pleasure gone? It has stopped. What has replaced it is unpleasure, is dissatisfaction, more dissatisfaction. Your stomach is full, the cake looks disgusting, and you'd vomit if you ate another mouthful. We know this is true. This is scientific investigation, and we know it is true. But because we are junkies and have been doing it for eons, and we have no other method to get happy, every day we keep thinking maybe I'll try it again. And the Buddha says it just spirals down, you know. I think we all recognize this. That's an analysis of clinging, okay, people? And it took me a whole hour to tell you. And so now this is the other part. What's the response? So what happens, what replaces the attachment as it gets dissatisfied again is the other state of mind, which is that the milder version of anger is aversion. And we know that's true. The cake looks divine when your stomach's empty and attachment's fully developed. And then when it's dissatisfied, what's in its place? Aversion, disgust. That cake looks disgusting. That's a mild level of anger. So if it's a person, of course, you don't get angry with the cake and kick the cake and punch the cake. But if it's your boyfriend, you will. Because the anger is a more volatile expression of the bare bones state of mind called aversion. So you've got attachment that exaggerates the deliciousness, it makes you all excited. You have aversion, which is like a panic attack when attachment is thwarted, when attachment dissipates. Aversion takes its place. So attachment and aversion have this intimate, inextricable relationship. Aversion or anger is the response when attachment finally is again thwarted or disappointed or doesn't get what it wants. And this is how we live our lives to one degree or another. And this is a source of the nightmare of sentient beings. Monkeys and dogs and ants as well. This is programmed in our minds, Buddha says, for countless lifetimes. And he says he's found a method to get rid of it. Sounds delicious to me. So now it's time for questions.
I have a question in the chat. Sometimes when we have craving for something, can it be the need of the body for a certain type of food, even sugar, to help give the brain or body energy?
All this does, that's exactly right. It's a good point. All that does is point to the intimate relationship between the mind and the body. That's it. The body, of course, that's how we talk. And in fact, in our modern world, we don't even posit anything that's not physical, frankly. The Buddha's view is that the mind is not physical and it comes from past lives. This is a very different view. But because of the intimate relationship between the body and the mind, and the Vajrayana model has a very sophisticated way of seeing this, is the same as the Chinese medical system. Is interesting. But even just the way we talk in the modern world, of course, there's an intimate relationship between the physical and the mental. But bottom line is craving, clinging, attachment, grasping is a function of the mind. But because that attachment's so strong, it affects the physical. You can say it like that. Well, certainly in the Vajrayana model, you know, but we won't go there. Don't need to. Or you could. Let's just go. If you go to you've got this subtle wind. It's the same as a Chinese one. You've got this subtle wind energy. No, we won't go there. We won't go there. But the Buddhist way of explaining it, it is physical. That, of course, but it's driven by, it's rooted in being the mind, and that's from. So you can even say this is where the karma one comes in. Due to the habit of attachment from countless lifetimes. This is a very different discussion, of course. We don't think this way in modern psychology, but it's giving the background here, why it's so pervasive and why it's so instinctive, and is that you come into this life with a strong tendency for attachment. And because of due to that karma, you're born to a family of people with certain kind of genetic makeup that ends up being, you've got a craving for sugar. In other words, that's really so it is the physical, but it's rooted in being the mind. It's rooted in being the mind, and we can change. I mean, we can see that if you've got a tendency to get diabetes, which is physical, of course, you are forced. You're forced to change your body, your attitude. You're forced to change your mind and make a decision, mental, not to eat that thing. So clearly, yes, it is physical. But the whole idea of craving it is rooted in the mind, and whether we're talking past or now. But so it doesn't mean it's easy to change. My goodness, no, no way in the world. It's not easy to change, you know. But the symptoms of it are expressed, put it that way, the symptoms of it are expressed in the body. The indications of the presence of this attachment from past as well, we can see them, we experience them in the body. There's no doubt about that. So because it shows the intimate relationship. So I hope that's a helpful way to hear it, you know. Yeah.
We have another question from the chat.
Yeah.
How do you begin to reduce the clinging?
Exactly. Of course, that's the thing. Well, we've just taken the first step by explaining it. How do I begin being a gardener? Well, you first have to establish a thing called botany. If you've never heard of botany before, if you've never heard of the method of describing what's growing in your backyard, so the first step is to even posit there's a law, there's a set of rules and protocols that can describe your garden. The very first step, because I want to be a gardener. I want to make sense of my garden. What can I do? First establish as possible. Then you find a person who's got the methodology and you first listen. This is the first step, even to acknowledge this. And then the very first step, which is a helpful one, as I said before, if the level to which we can do this job is quite much more subtle in Buddhism, way more subtle, and I would suggest sophisticated than the way we think of it in therapy, where you go to your therapist and talk it through, and that's pretty intense already. But the level to which we can do this is way more subtle, and in the long term, we need to be at this subtle level, which is where we demand this concentration technique, this so-called mindfulness. There's a million ways of, I mean, there's so many mindfulness techniques, and that's okay. People can make up their own. But the Buddhist approach is, you know, we can call it concentration meditation. And it's a technique that, again, this invented by these Indians 3,000 years ago, that enables us to train to focus our mind. So that's just a training. There's no magic going to come from training your mind, but you're starting the job of staying focused. Why? So that your mind can be more focused in its internal investigation and the distinguishing between the different states of mind. And then, or even just making decisions. So that's how you start, knowing it's possible. And you start with having a little 5-minute practice every morning, I suppose. You could say with that. But it's the attitude that it's possible and that you want to do it. But then you've got to have long-term view. Because if you start then shifting your attachment from cake to meditation, you'd be in big trouble. Or start changing your attachment to from cake to becoming a meditator. It's a long term, but any process, no matter even as but once we know if there is a methodology there, no matter what the process is, if there is a methodology, if there is an explanation of that thing, a garden might take 50 years, a garden might take 30 years, but you're happy to take that time because you can see the future, you know what you're doing, and everything you plant in that garden now and everything you do in that garden now will bring the result of your beautiful garden. So it can be encouraging. So this is why in the Buddhist view, it's really incredibly encouraging to hear that the benefit of doing this job, which is very painful, is a happy, even just simple, forget getting rid of it all, that's long term, but even just the relative reasonable result of beginning to do this job is that it will turn you into a more happy, more fulfilled, more content, more wise, and therefore more empathetic, compassionate human being. That's the bottom line, So it's long term. But once you have the methodology and you start with a little practice, and you start to listen to these teachings and think about it and have a practice every day, and you move from there. You move forward. So the usual way to do that would be to join a class, go to a course, It helps to do that, But to have the big picture, it's important. When you're doing gardening, if you just think it's going to give you some pleasure to go out in your garden and go knee deep in all the dirt, you won't get much pleasure. You'll give up quite quickly. But if you've got the long-term picture of your beautiful garden, then you've got more enthusiasm to persevere through it, That's a really important view, I tell you. Because this dissatisfaction, the function of attachment, we're always, no matter how much we achieve, the tragedy is we'll keep being dissatisfied. So it's like catch-22. You've got to catch that and go, no, I'm doing well. You've got to change the the script in your head and learn to be satisfied. I'm only in grade 1 in this process, you say to yourself, and I've got more to go, but I'm happy with what I'm doing. I'm happy with my progress. Even Buddhists in 20, 30, 40 years, we forget this one. We are obsessively always thinking, I'm not doing enough. Even though you've achieved so much, we're always dissatisfied. It's a deep, deep addiction to be dissatisfied. So we've got to trick it, catch it, and train ourselves into saying, I'm doing a good job. Okay, if you're not doing the job, don't be satisfied. But if you are, be satisfied. Be happy. Say, it doesn't mean satisfied, doesn't mean complacent. Doesn't mean you won't going to keep trying and going to the next level. No, it's being delighting in your progress so far. It's so important to do that one, I tell you. What else there? Effie?
Got a couple more really good questions in the chat. The first one from the chat is, nowadays, people don't have the concept of being polite, forgiving, or setting healthy boundaries. As Buddhists, how do we deal with that?
I'd really like to talk to people. Who's saying this? Who is the person asking this? I want to chat to you. Where are you? I prefer to be personal. If you don't want it to be personal, please, I want that. Carol, good. Talk to me,
There
darling.
she is.
Talk to me. Hello, sweetheart. Well, you started. You said a whole bunch of things. You mentioned polite, and that was a good, interesting first step. So why don't you say all those words again?
Oh yeah, so my question was that nowadays I feel like a lot of people they don't really have the concept of being polite, forgiving, or setting health boundaries. So as a Buddhist, how do we deal with that?
Well, that's a really huge question. It's really 3 completely different questions. So it's interesting you started with being polite, and then you started setting boundaries, and then you said forgiving. So which is, they're very, very different states of mind, darling. They're all linked. But which is the main one for you? Because you did say polite first. So that's a very broad question. Polite, forgiving, boundaries. Which one would you like to discuss first?
So I would say like forgiving. So for example, like recently, I felt like when I was talking to my friends and maybe I made a mistake, maybe unknowingly that I offended them. So I felt like really bad. But even after I apologized, I opened up, I made myself vulnerable. Um, I made many positive attempts, but then I just realized like my friends, once they form an impression, is like that they stick to it. They don't want to they don't want to open up, they don't want to communicate with me anymore, they don't want to forgive me. So that's why I just kind of like stuck. um I mean,
understand.
I
So
just
now,
like getting.
now I understand. And now I understand your question, Carol. Now I understand where it's coming from. This is very, very helpful. So this is the thing. Okay. First of all, okay, there's 2 things here. We all know what you're saying. We all identify exactly that kind of experience, being on your end of it, being the recipient of someone else's unkindness, someone else's, non-forgiveness. We really do concede that. So it's good. We can do an analysis of it. But I think always the first step in Buddhism is, and this is not the question you're asking, but I'm going to answer it this way, and I will. But there's 2 things. One is to look at what it is in us. What it is if I'm talking let's say I'm telling you the exact story that you're telling me, and it's my sister, let's say, and I'm saying I feel exactly like you feel. Well, the very first approach in Buddhism, if I've got a Buddhist practice, I see what she's doing, but my first approach is to look into my mind and see what it is in me that's causing the pain, because she isn't being kind and she isn't being forgiving. That's the really deep one to look at. I can give a very clear analysis and for you from Buddhism point of view of the other person's problem. But you've also got a problem, isn't it? And your problem is it's painful, you're suffering, it's difficult, and you wish she'd change her view and you feel really hurt. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, for sure. I miss
An
her.
example, so do that. So tell us one you've just described. This is really good discussion. You've just described a person's behavior, but it's described through the lenses of your view, isn't it? Your mind. So talk about what that has done to you. Describe what it is in you that behavior has triggered. How to speak simply. We all know it. So why don't you, for our example, for all of us, why don't you say, so you're saying you feel disappointed, you feel hurt. Would you agree with that? You feel that she's not seeing you, she's not, and you feel hurt because you didn't mean it. That's how you're feeling. Would you say that? So, or say it in your words, what you're feeling. What are the names of the states of mind in you that her behavior has triggered? Put it that way. Tell us.
Okay, so I would say that I felt frustrated, sad,
Uh-huh.
um, and I'm also trying different ways to make it up to her, but
Yep.
also at the same time, I felt like maybe when I initially made comments with her, maybe I wasn't as mindful. I didn't put myself in her position.
Uh-huh.
Maybe I assumed too much from the
Uh-huh.
beginning.
Uh-huh. Exactly. I
Uh,
understand.
then I didn't do the replacement of thinking in her position how she would feel when I make certain comments or when I use certain words.
I
So
understand. This is very good, Carol. This is so important. It's so important. This is what you're saying is, and this is the point. We have to, the starting, always the Buddhist one, interestingly, the starting point is what's going on in me. That's so in a way, by asking your question about the other person, and you're right, you've done a good analysis. This person is not forgiving you. So you could argue from her point of view, and we're just saying in general, that could be pride. Pride is very rigid. How dare you insult me? She's feeling offended by you. So if she weren't proud, if she were more humble, she wouldn't be so offended. She'd forgive you easily. So you could argue that response of hers is because there's pride there, and pride is very stubborn. So can you hear that? That's the analysis of her. So that's pride. So now we look at it from your point of view. What is it in you that was so hurt? So if we look at it classically, attachment doesn't just want cake. The main attachment in every human being is the hunger to be liked and seen and heard and approved of. So you could argue that your suffering is caused by that need in you. And join the universe, Carol. We have all got it. We have this emotional need, hunger. Forget about cake and video games. The deepest attachment is the hunger to be seen and heard and respected by others. So because you could say you are suffering because of that attachment. Do you see my point? Or not?
yeah, yes, yes,
There's
yes.
two things.
I
Hang on,
I
before we
also
go,
have the
it is true what you're saying about that person. You can identify pride and her stubborn mind, but that's her problem. Now let's look at Carol's problem. This is always the talk to do. Because do you see my point? So you have to see in you didn't do badly. You didn't harm her much. You really didn't. So she is suffering because of her pride, which is coming from her exaggeration of her importance. And that comes along with anger. She's also angry with you. And anger comes because her attachment didn't get what it wanted, which was for you to praise her. So you both got the same disease, but we're each experiencing it differently at different times. So you've got to look at your mind and see that you've got what we've all got, which is this deepest attachment, Carol. It's so subtle. It's always there. We always want to be liked and approved of. So you are feeling such pain because she's not doing it. She's being mean to you still and doesn't forgive you. It's so cruel of her. And she's doing that because she's got attachment and her attachment didn't get what it wanted. And then she got angry and then she's proud as well. That's the analysis. You get my point, Carol, sweetheart.
yes, I did.
Oh, that's the Buddhist analysis, baby. So the fact
Cool.
is,
Got it.
You've got to make some decisions. So when you see you've got that, and you're being so kind, you are trying. You're asking her to forgive you, and she's not. So this is where you've got to now leave it alone, because in a way you're pushing her because you want her to forgive you again, because you want to feel better. You're relying upon her making you feel better. Well, that's mean. Let her go. Maybe she's not capable. Give the girl a break.
Because I also want her back,
Of course
but
you
it seems
do.
like she doesn't want to continue the friendship. That's
No,
why I'm sad.
I know, of course you are, darling. I really hear that. It is sad, but then let it be and just calm. See if you can see your own part of it, your own need to be loved and approved of, which we've all got, and then let her be. Recognize that she's suffering because of her stubbornness, her anger, her pride. That's why she's suffering. You know that. Give it a break. Let her be, and see what happens. And see your own need, your hunger, your emotional hunger for her to make you feel better. It's we're so linked together. Do you see my point, darling?
Oh, yeah. So maybe of my desire, wanting her to come back to me in a way, I'm also being selfish.
In a way, there is a selfish component because you're feeling like if she makes you feel better, oh, phew, I'm off the hook now. Everything's lovely again. This is very subtle, but it's very true. So you have to learn to realize that's who she is. Leave her alone, learn something about her, but learn about yourself and go, I meant well. If she can't forgive me, I'm still okay. I don't need her forgiveness to make me feel like I'm a real person. That's the deepest attachment of need to be approved of. But you can approve of yourself, Carol.
Oh, I see. Okay. Oh, wow. Wow. I learned a lot. This is deep.
You understand? Good,
Yes,
darling. Keep
ma'am.
going. Okay, keep going, darling. You're doing
Thank you
great.
so
Be
much.
happy. Good, sweetheart. I'm very happy. Good, darling. That's why it's better that the person asks their own question, isn't it? But talk to me, Jessica. You hear it.
My question was actually more, you know, learning from your own path and journey on this. I was curious when you were first doing these practices and learning this discernment and how to, understand your attachment. Was there something that you particularly struggled with? And if you're willing to share, and how you overcame that specifically, like
I
what
understand,
was
darling.
your
And I think
method?
in one sense, this job is the same for all of us. It's just a question of
Mhm.
some people have more pride, some less pride. Some people are more low self-esteem. Some people are more angry. You see, we're all very, but the basics are the same really for all of us, I'd say. The idea, first of all, was always, I always joke about it. The thought of sitting down on my bottom and meditating was such a boring idea. I didn't even try to pretend to think of it. I just knew, but I knew I wanted to know my mind. That's what I liked from the very beginning. I knew that's what I'd never done in my life. I tried to change the outside. I've been this political activist all my life, running around with a lot of confidence, trying to bash the world into shit. You understand, that was my style. So then when I came to the Buddhist, wanting something spiritual again, when I was 13, that's what I heard. Wow, I've got to look inside first. I've got to work on this person. I want to change the outside world. That's good. I want to make the world a better place. But then I have to work on here, because if I'm running around getting angry and upset all the time, how can I help anybody? That was really what was really. And so for me, from day one, I think it was just being very, just confronting all of this. And so beginning to realize that if you're you really learn well when you're in a difficult situation. It's really good to play safe and have a nice meditation practice and feel good every day. But until your hubby starts slurping his coffee, forget shouting at you, just slurping his coffee.
Yeah.
As soon as attachment's a junkie that only wants what it wants. It only wants what I want. It thinks that what I want is the only thing that's right. It's hungry to get everything to be nice and pretty. When we see that, then if you really want to give up attachment, the best opportunity is after your cushion, having a nice mindfulness meditation, feeling lovely, you go down to the kitchen and there's the slurping of the coffee. Now the chance is to start practicing, because anger, irritation, annoyance, upset, frustration, these polite words are mild anger, and they are the response when your attachment doesn't get what it wants. So for me in my life, being volatile type person, it was really powerful to understand that. And so, because anger was a very common thing for me to leap into sort of And so that's the dynamic was from day one. But this is the day wanting to do it, liking the explanations, and then the job of it was just hard. It's just a hard job, and each of us in our own way. I don't have husbands and children, but it doesn't matter. We've all got people in our lives, and each of us has got different types of attachments. So it's really seeing that it's possible to do that. That's all, and it's hard work. I can only say it like that. Do you understand me?
Yeah.
Real practice starts when attachment suddenly doesn't get. And you could say with Carol, she meant well. She did be kind. She was trying to apologize, but her attachment, her neediness to be seen as a good girl and to be approved of and forgiven wasn't met. So she's feeling hurt. That's a good thing to look at. And she got it. She's smiling. Get my point?
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
hard, and that's not easy. We'd rather have everything be lovely, and feel nice.
Yeah, I do. I think that's really helpful for me because I just came back from a really nourishing retreat, and I was in India, and it
There you
was so
go.
beautiful and
There you
blissful,
go.
and like outside this country and coming back, the reentry
Yes.
has been so
That-
hard.
That's right.
And
Exactly.
so it's like reframing it as
Yeah.
I'm seeing the attachment I have to
That's
that
right.
blissful space.
And that's right. That's right. And it's lovely to have the nice things. It's good to have. We shouldn't be resentful.
Yeah.
It's good to have a good friend. It's lovely if Carol has a friend. It's lovely to have a good situation and get some insights. But then the real work starts. And that's the thing. If we can see that we can ground ourselves and be steady, and if we give up a little bit of that neediness for things to be lovely, we can start becoming stronger and more capable of dealing with the dramas, and then more capable of helping others, Jessica, because we're all in the same boat,
Yeah. Thank you.
Passion makes us so fragile. Do you understand,
Yes.
darling? Well done.
Yes.
You did it as well. Good on you. Even if we're Buddhists, we know this, but it's really helpful. It's like a little ending. We finish, and it's a nice concept, this dedication. Here we've been for 90 minutes, listening. Me too, I tell you, understanding, learning from this about our mind. So we've sort of done 90 minutes of hard work. Well, this doesn't go astray. From the Buddhist perspective of karma, everything goes into the mind. So we've just sown 90 minutes of wonderful seeds in our mind. And be happy about that. Rejoice we've just done this activity. It won't just go in one ear and out the other. It stays in the mind. So we dedicate it. We think all these seeds we've planted, I'm going to nourish these seeds with my practice from this second so I can become this marvelous person no matter how long it takes, so I can really be of benefit to others. That's what these words are saying, So have that thought. We'll just sing it in Tibetan. Gewadinyu dudag Lama Sangye Drub Gyurne Drowa Chikyang Malupar Deyi Sala Kupasho. And then this other one, this is marvelous, is may this marvelous compassion, which is the virtues, may grow, this wish to benefit others coming from compassion and love, may that energy grow and grow in the hearts of all. First you pull out the weeds and then you grow the flowers. So this is growing the flowers prayer. Changchom semchog rinpoche ma kiepa nam kegyuchig kiepa nyampa mepa yang gongne gongdu pavasho. In our hearts have the feeling these amazing beings on this planet whom I'm learning from me, who show me vividly that this is what we're capable of, and it's very encouraging to have those people. May they live long. The world needs people like that so badly. The Dalai Lama, even though he's 90-something now, his presence on this planet is so incredible. So may he live a long life so he can continue to show us what is possible. We need those examples, otherwise we despair, And Lama Zopa Rinpoche, for many of us, our teacher, the teacher of this center, he's passed away, and of course Buddhism talks about reincarnation. So he passed away 2 years ago. May he come back soon. We create the course for him to come back and continue to show us what's possible. That's the heart, in our hearts, those wishes. As expressed in those two little prayers we were going to say, okay? That's the meaning. Thank you, precious people. So kind. We'll get in my normal time zone in next Saturday, okay?
Thank you so much, Venerable Rabina. If people could stay with us just a few more minutes.
Thank you, Venerable Rabina.
Hang around with Effie and hang around and listen to Effie and Lynn, and I'll go.
Yeah, you get to bed. Lynn's going to talk about the programs that we have coming up and also the Treasury of Lives. So let me just bring that back up.
And I just want to throw in, thank you, Venerable Rubina. I'm sure she's tucked in already. May she live long, and may she continue to bring the Dharma to us in the many ways that she does, including her coming in person to Sachin Ling twice next month under the Women of Wisdom umbrella. She's doing a Green Tara intensive on Sunday, April 13th, all day. It's also going to be on Zoom. And then the program on Tuesday night, April 15th, Stay Steady. We could use that right now, huh? And then just basically getting back to this wonderful women of wisdom celebrating the living legacy of Buddhist women. It's a mouthful. That Sachin Ling is proud to partner with organizations whose work aligns with the aims of the series. And while you're reading this Machik Labdron bio, little bullet points about her, the mission of the Treasury of Lives is to provide access to Tibetan history and religion through the life stories of all people from the region. However, with such a shockingly low number of biographies being of women, the Treasury launched their Women Initiative, a dedicated effort to better balance the site with the goal of publishing 100 biographies of women over 3 years. For our Women of Wisdom series, we are highlighting one of the bios from the Women Initiative at the end of each presentation in this program. There you go. And then let's see, what else do we have to say about this? Do I have anything more to add? I may. Oh, we heartily encourage all those attending events in this series to explore the work of Treasury of Lives. And of course, more details on Sachin Ling's Women of Wisdom series. Check out our website for the next Women of Wisdom events in April. And I just told you what they were with Venerable Rubina. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you, everyone, for being here, especially those brave enough to get on camera and ask their questions. Carol and Jessica. Everybody, thank you. Good night.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you, everyone. Thank you, Effie, Lynn,
Thank
everybody.
you. Thank you so much.
Good night.